Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 282, and we're going to talk about modernity, post-modernity, and then post-postmodernity. And then we get to close with a little bit on Greenland. So sorry about yesterday. I couldn't do an episode. I was just so tired. I stayed up really late on Monday night to finish a book review I was writing. And then I had to teach on Tuesday, and I just had no gas left. When I get really tired, I can't really think analytically. And so I was looking at news stories and just nothing was coming to me. And then even today, a full day of teaching, it was Wednesday's my hardest day. And then we had a faculty meeting, and then I had Wednesday services. I just got back, and so I'm going to do a recording. But after I do the recording, I gotta type up some midterm review study sheets for three of my classes. So give me a like for that. Anyway, just anyway, a pitch for that. So I was reading something, and it talked about modernity. The concept of modernity was, or the modern, what is modern, was mentioned in the book. And I thought, oh, why not talk about this? Because it seemed like modernity was a big deal, right? And so a lot of people who struggle with faith, they struggle against modernity. So I thought I'd explain it a little bit, very, very simple, very, very simple. It was simpler than Cliff's Notes, if you remember what those were, Spark Notes, or yeah, just a shortcut way. Instead of reading the whole book, there would be a short summary. So this will be shorter than short. But the modern age is the age that is also called the Enlightenment, or the age of reason, where you're going to use logic, where you're going to use research, science, facts, not faith, right? And so the implication here is that faith, like a religious faith, you're not going to have any kind of information at all. You're just going to say stuff and then believe it, right? So you're going to basically believe in illogical things, things that go and defy or stand against reason, right? And that's generally how a lot of people understand reason versus faith. Okay, so Thomas Paine would be a great example. He wrote The Age of Reason. His short book is called The Age of Reason. He wrote it when he was in prison because he was trying to help out in the French Revolution, and it turned out they weren't really keen on reason, at least the way Thomas Paine wrote about it. And so in The Age of Reason, he emphasizes science and logic. But to his credit, Thomas Paine, towards the end of his book, he said, but hey, if you want to believe in a religion, knock yourself out, but count me out, right? And so he stands against the priesthood, that they basically oversee ignorance, So he's pretty harsh on religion in general, and that is what a lot of people, particularly in the Christian church, see as their number one enemy when it comes to logic versus faith, right? So they think that the modern period, or modernity, is their big rival. But what a lot of people, particularly who are very deep in the religious fields, what they don't realize is that the modern age ended around 1950. And then what came after that is what's called the postmodern period, right? And if we were to say that the modern period, because it was full of reason and research, what they did primarily was label everything, categorize everything, classify everything. So they would take something and they would say, oh, where does this fit? And they would stick everything in categories. And so just the other day, I was talking about how in biology you have phylum, genus, class, species. So they're classifying everything. And this is also where race and gender become set in stone, right? So these are races, these are genders, right? It's all part of this modern age, this modern movement of using logic and reason, science to understand the world. And so from that, you get categorization, classification. Okay. And then comes the postmodern period, and that had its height in the 1990s. Okay. So everything was postmodernist deconstruction. Okay. So the postmodernists. And what they focused on, what that movement was all about, was showing how if you do research and use your logic, it's always going to be from a specific perspective, right? So if you, based on your background, your knowledge, your information, even the way you perceive things, think about the shadow sculpture, right? So depending on how you're perceiving it, what you're seeing is going to be different. So whoever is writing these books, whoever is writing articles or teaching, it's always going to be from their subjectivity. It's always going to be from their perspective. So any kind of classification, any kind of categorization is going to be subjective. It's not the truth, right? So modernity or the modern age was all about facts, right? So this is a fact, and it's always going to be true. And the postmodern period said, well, it depends, right? It depends on your perspective that maybe it's a fact, right? And so I would always get into these discussions or arguments with some students where they would say, no, we all know that there are things called facts. And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe, probably not. And there are many different ways where you can take something that people thought was a fact and you make it less than a fact. And so one student, he got an edge on me. He sent me an email and he says, Harrisburg is the capital of the state of Pennsylvania in the United States. That's a fact. And I said, well, 200 years ago it wasn't, right? And so you go back far back enough in time, that wasn't a fact. And the nature of a fact, it is always true, right? And so that's to say 500 years from now, 1,000 years from now, maybe Harrisburg doesn't exist anymore. Maybe the United States doesn't exist anymore. And so that what he thought was a fact forever and ever always true, no, it won't, right? It won't be true. You can also undermine facts by changing the system that you're using to measure, right? So if you're using feet and yards and then all of a sudden change everything to centimeters and meters, well, now everything changes and it's no longer true. Things that you thought were true are no longer true. And I know some of you are going to say, oh, you're just changing the measurement, but the measurements are always going to be the same. But we're talking about facts, right? Specifically. And so by changing the scale, you're also going to be changing lots of other things. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. And so most people are going to believe the things that they believe because they share the same perspective or they share the same subjectivity. And most of scholarship, most academic writing, like books and journals, lectures, articles, whatever, the author is trying to convince or persuade readers to see things their way, right? To get them to stop looking at the world with their subjectivity from their perspective and look at things from the perspective or the view of the author, right? And so that's it's a political endeavor. It's a political action, right? I'm trying to persuade people to see things my way. And if they see things my way, then they're going to agree with me and I benefit from that. Okay, so postmodernity says, right? So modern age is classification. Postmodernity says everything is subjective. There is no truth, right? And so what you think is true is only true because you have that perspective. Change your perspective and all your truth changes, right? July 4th, 1776, Independence Day in America, but in England, it's Rebellion Day, it's Revolution Day, it's when those colonies decided to rebel against, Mother England or whatever you call it. So that's what I mean. So the meaning and significance of events and little details, they change based on your subjectivity. All right. And that's only for me, and you can debate that, but this is postmodernity, right? This is postmodern, that everything is subjective, that there is no truth, there are no facts. Everything that you think is true, it is only subjectively true. Change your subjectivity, change your perspective, and the truth changes as well. Okay. So based on what you know, your subjectivity, the questions you ask, you will come to different conclusions. Okay. It's not that you're talking about different things. It's not that you're wrong. It's just that your perspective is different. And so, therefore, how you understand things, what you're going to conclude is going to be different. So the postmodernist says we cannot know anything. And that's why you have today this whole woke drama thing, right? Where you can say pretty much anything. I'm going to make up all these pronouns. Don't misgender me. All of this phenomena is based on this idea that there is no truth, there are no facts, there's no absolute truth. And you can see this in Hollywood as well. If you go back a little bit to The Matrix, the first Matrix movie, I think the Wachowski brothers, I think, did that. And there's postmodern language all over that movie, right? Morpheus looks at Neo when he's trying to teach Neo about the Matrix. He brings him to a artificial self-enclosed world, and he says, "This is the construct," and he uses it for practice, right? And so construct, yeah, they create a reality. Okay. And it's real if you believe in it. So you can die in the Matrix because you believe that it's real. And later on in the movie, right, they have these kids who look like they might be the one, and so they're being tested. And so Neo talks to this little kid, and he's bending spoons with his mind. And then the kid says to Neo, the trick is to realize there is no spoon, right? There's no reality, or there are no rules except the ones that we think are true, and then we try to abide by those rules. But the movie is trying to say, no, rules are subject to change, right? So that's postmodernism. There is no truth. We can say anything we want. We can do whatever we want. I can be anything I want, and I can change according to my convenience. Okay. Now, I'll go into the problem with that in a moment, but before we do, we have to talk about postmodernism. So the modern postmodern period didn't last that long. As I said, the height was in the 1990s, and then after that, you had postmodernism, right? The period after the period that came after modernism, right? So postmodern. There's no name for it yet. I guess it has to end first before they give a name to it. But postmodernism is all about probability. Okay. So postmodernism disagrees or moves beyond postmodernism and says, hey, look, you say there is no truth in postmodernism, but truth is only undermined. If you look closely, you will see patterns and you will see probability, right? And so reality is more about probability tables, right? Uh, there's a show discontinued. I might have talked about it before, but it's called Numbers, NUB3RS, right? So instead of an E, it's a number three. And if you look it up, season one is the best, okay? And that's really all you have to watch. But using math, they create probability tables and they can predict when and where a serial killer or a serial criminal will commit another crime, right? And it's pretty cool if you look at it, right? Now, it's a TV show meant for TV, and so they shortened the length of because they have to fit it in one episode, right? But generally, the length of time required to do all the math and whatnot takes a little bit longer. But nevertheless, the FBI, NSA, they use mathematicians to solve crime because there are patterns in human behavior. Okay. And so it's not that there is absolutely no truth. No, there are patterns out there and there's probability. And maybe you might not want to call it the truth, but there is probability, right? So there is a chance that the next thing is predictable, right? Which hints at some kind of deeper truth. Okay. So, if to come clean, the book that I was asked to review talked about modernity and how it was a challenge for people who have faith. But I was sort of like, what do you even postmodern, right? And then what about postmodernism, right? So I maintain that a lot of my fellow former colleagues in the university misunderstand postmodernism. And that's why we have all this woke stuff happening today, right? All this sort of, legalistic, you know, No different than any other kind of fanatical religion, wokester stuff, right? Postmodernism, all it does through deconstruction is reveal subjectivity, reveal perspective. It does not eradicate facts, right? You choose what you want to believe in. So if you want to believe that if I jump off this building, I'm going to die, well, that's your choice. You can believe that. I can choose not to believe it, but it doesn't mean that it's not true. Okay. If you get what I'm saying. So all postmodernism does is reveal the subjectivity that you are using, right? So instead of saying this fact just appeared, has no subjectivity, it has no origin, it's just a truth that I've discovered, right? So you see? And so postmodernist deconstruction says, no, I'm deconstructing it to reveal where this information came from, whose perspective was used to create that information, okay? But a lot of people, particularly on the left and on the right, right, they do it in different about different things, right? They get stuck on the deconstruction, but in its place, they reestablish certain truths that they subscribe to, but they do it in a way that is hypocritical, right? So they object when other people try to force them to believe things that they think are ridiculous, but then they turn around and force other people to have to agree with or live by the things that they believe, right? So it's all an exercise in hypocrisy. It has become an exercise in hypocrisy, right? So everyone is fighting for their own rights, empowered by the sense of superiority that they get from their narrow subjectivity. I said a mouthful, but hopefully you caught that, or you can play it back to repeat to hear what I said, right? So everyone is fighting for their own subjectivity, and that, of course, results in coercion, oppression, which we reject in this channel. Okay. So many of my former colleagues in the university are stuck there, right? They're stuck thinking after they're deconstructed properly, they can reassert and reestablish a different truth, but that truth is better, right? Because clearly the truths that they deconstructed were obviously racist, sexist, or whatever. It had all these problems, but their new truth doesn't have any of those problems. But see, that's where the hypocrisy comes in. Of course, it has problems, right? And so that's why a lot of university professors, scholars, that's why they sound so silly, because they're engaging in exercises of hypocrisy, but they don't see it. They don't even realize it, which makes it kind of comical, which makes it funny. A lot of people have attacked me while I was in the university, and it was just so easy for me to defend myself because they're being hypocritical. You see what I mean? And so that was how I was able to survive for over 20 years. But they finally got me. But nevertheless, I was able to survive that long because all I would do is deconstruct the people who were trying to uh, get at me. All right. And so some people are stuck on modernity, like that's the threat. Some people get stuck on postmodernism, that's the threat. But they don't realize that everything is now all about probability, right? The postmodernist period, right? So as long as you realize that all of this stuff is constantly in flux, constantly changing, constantly evolving, then really what people are trying to do is they're trying to get an edge over you by the stuff that you don't know, right? And now that hopefully through this episode, you'll be aware of these three different terms, these three different, perspectives on thinking, epistemology, and how to evaluate information. Hopefully that'll help a lot. Again, modernity is simplify it is about classifying things, right? I researched, now I know the truth, and this truth belongs in this category. Okay, and so that's modernist period. The postmodern period says, nope, all these categories are subjective, they're invalid. And so therefore the truth that you have created as a result of all of the subjectivity, not true. That's postmodernism, right? No truth, right? We can do whatever we want, we can make up whatever we want, and it'll be true. Postmodernalism says, whoa there now, there is something, but we don't know what it is exactly. So we do have probability though. And so if you like the numbers, if you like the odds, if you like the percentages, then go for it. And if you don't like the odds, then don't do it. Look for something else, okay? So different scholars get stuck at different points in time, probably has a lot to do with when they were doing their graduate work, but there it is, okay? So now you know, and hopefully people who are using mumbo jumbo $50 words, they won't be able to play you or get an edge on you, and you can make them feel very, very silly. Last thing I want to say something about Greenland. Right. I don't know if anyone else, hears Trump talking about Greenland and then you think of the Vikings, right? Because the Vikings went to Greenland, hundreds of years ago, before Columbus landed on Hispaniola. But Vikings were in Greenland and in, North America proper, and they left, right? Because it was too difficult to live there. But now, because everyone is rushing to get minerals all over the world, and Russia's are apparently already around the North Pole and digging and drilling and going into the Arctic Ocean and looking for minerals. And that's why America now is trying to, enter that field themselves. And it's all part of a mercantilistic mentality. I don't know if anyone else you've listened to talked about this, but where you're not going to trade anymore. It's no longer about globalism, world trade, but you are going to produce and uh, acquire all of the materials you need to be self-sufficient yourself. You're not going to rely on another country. You're not going to trade with another country. And in this kind of mindset, mercantilistic mindset, war is great, right? So you're competing with other people. You're not going to trade. Instead, you're going to kill each other, right? AKA the way the Vikings used to do it. And I've said before in different episodes that Vikings did not produce anything. So they weren't creators of value. They destroyed value. When they stole from the people who made things and then used it all up, see, they were destroying value. Some people might say, oh, but they made themselves rich. No, but if you look globally, they have decreased the amount of value by destroying things and murdering people. They decrease the overall value of the global population. Okay. Mercantilism wastes a lot of the effort, right? And so, just like in my episode about the Minoans, right? Trade is always better, right? So instead of trying to buy Greenland or annex Canada, trade with them more, not impose tariffs, but trade with people. Like let other people deal with taking care of that vast space called Greenland. And who wants to have another California type state, aka Canada? I mean, why would we want that, right? Let them be on their own, but trade with them. And if we are trading fairly, then people who are engaging in, less than fair practices, they are the ones who are going to lose in the long run. Just like how the United States has declined economically because they were not being fair, right? They were abusing the privilege of the dollar, right? The reserve currency of the world. They were abusing that privilege, and so they were cheating everybody with it. Okay, so if the U.S. government becomes honest again, then trade is always going to be the better approach, not annexation, conquering, stealing. No, no, all of that is bad. You're decreasing value in the world. You want trade, and through trade, you increase the value of everything. The standard of living goes up of everybody. Okay, everyone benefits through free trade. And what seems to be going on now is people hell bent to try to destroy as much as possible. But trading makes everything cheaper, it's beneficial for everybody, and it promotes world peace. So, can we stop it already and move on and figure out how to be free again? That's it for this episode. Thank you for your patience. Throw me a like, subscribe, share it, send it to your relatives, whatever. And I'll talk to you next time.